The salt-laced wind was a familiar companion to Cole, a constant, abrasive whisper against the windows of his office perched on the city's edge. He dealt in the rough edges of human experience, in the moments where narratives fractured, and the official story felt like a flimsy veil. His work was less about grand revelations and more about the meticulous sifting of debris, searching for the speck that didn't belong. Today, the debris had a name: the Doctor. The woman who sat across from him, Clara Thorne, was a study in controlled devastation. Her expensive tweed coat, though immaculate, seemed a shield against an invisible onslaught. Her eyes, however, held no such defense. They were raw, burning with a conviction that defied the police report she clutched in her white-knuckled grip. "They called it suicide, Mr. Cole," she began, her voice a low, steady current of outrage. "His father, Elias. They said he drove out to the old Blackwood lighthouse, locked himself in and took his own life." She paused, a visible shiver passing through her. "It's a lie." Cole leaned back, his gaze unblinking. He'd heard variations of this plea countless times. Grief, guilt, the desperate need for a different truth. They all twisted perception. "The police are thorough, Ms. Thorne. What makes you so certain they're wrong?" "Because Cole knew his father," she retorted, her voice rising slightly before she reined it in. "Elias Thorne was a man who cherished life. He was meticulous, precise, a creature of habit. He had a full research grant approved just last week, a trip to the archives in the colleague planned for next month. He was not depressed, he was not desperate, and he certainly wasn't suicidal." Her hand trembled as she pushed the report across his desk. They found a note, a hastily scrawled, utterly uncharacteristic note. And they found him. In that desolate place. Cole picked up the report. The doctor, 62, renowned historian. An agent at the base of the winding stairs in the abandoned Blackwood lighthouse. A guard of death, as determined by the authorities, was consistent with self-inflicted strangulation. The scene had been processed, the body removed, the case closed. A figure procedure. "An abandoned lighthouse, Ms. Thorne?" Cole mused, his voice flat. "Why there?" Clara's jaw tightened. "He never went there. It holds no significance for him. No sentimental value, no historical connection to his work. It's remote, crumbling. It makes no sense." Cole considered her, the tremor in her hands, the unwavering certainty in her eyes. It wasn't just grief. It was a profound, almost visceral rejection of the official narrative. He usually avoided these kinds of cases, the ones built on intuition rather than hard evidence. But the fee she'd offered was substantial, and her conviction was unnerving. "All right, Ms. Thorne," Cole said, picking up his car keys. "Cole will take a look. No promises, just an assessment." The drive to Blackwood, the person, was a long, winding affair, taking Cole away from the city's sprawl and into the stark, wild embrace of the coast. The road dwindled to a gravel track, ending at a small, weather-beaten parking area. The lighthouse itself loomed against the steel-gray sky, a skeletal finger pointing heavenward, its whitewash long since peeled away by the relentless elements. It was a monument to isolation, a place where secrets could fester undisturbed. Cole stepped out, the wind immediately biting at his exposed skin, carrying the scent of salt and decay. The air was heavy, charged with a desolate energy. He walked towards the gaping, unbarred entrance, the wooden door having long since rotted away or been pilfered. He ascended the spiraling cast-iron staircase, his boots echoing in the cavernous space. Each step brought him higher, past layers of peeling paint, rusted metal, and the general detritus of neglect. The light filtering in through the tall, narrow windows grew stronger, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the stale air. Clara had said her father was found at the base of the stairs, but the incident report specified a small, alcove-like landing halfway up, a more secluded spot, perhaps. Cole reached the landing. The police had long since cleared the scene, but the ghost of an event lingered. It was a deep, almost purplish hue, not quite black, and it had soaked into the porous rock. He crouched, examining it, but there was nothing conclusive to be gleaned from the dried mark. His eyes swept the immediate area. The space was small, cramped. A single rickety wooden stool lay overturned near the wall. A few faded, wind-torn papers were scattered on the floor, likely unrelated to the incident, just debris blown in. A witness he saw it, or rather he didn't see it. The dust, everywhere, a thick, undisturbed blanket of fine, gray dust coated every surface, every crevice. But near the wall, where the stool lay, and extending a few feet around the faint stain, the dust was disturbed. A officer wiped clean, but compressed, matted down, as if something heavy had been dragged or someone had struggled, their weight pressing the grime into the stone. Yet the police report mentioned no signs of struggle. He knelt again, running a gloved finger along the edge of the disturbed dust. It wasn't a large area, but it was distinct, too neat for a violent thrashing, too deliberate for a simple fall. It suggested movement, a dragging motion perhaps, or a very specific, contained struggle. His gaze flicked to the ceiling above. A heavy, rusted iron hook protruded from the central beam, undoubtedly where the rope had been attached. He imagined the scene, the desperate act. But then his eyes fell to a small, almost imperceptible scuff mark on the wall directly opposite the hook. It was low, near the floor, a thin, almost parallel abrasion in the plaster, covered by a fine layer of dust, but distinct enough to catch his trained eye. It didn't align with the physics of a body suspended from above, nor with the position of the overturned stool. It looked like something had been pressed against the wall, then dragged. Cole straightened, a slow, calculated nod forming in his mind. The police had ruled it suicide, a tragic, isolated act. Clara Thorne's unwavering conviction, initially dismissed as grief, now felt like a premonition. The case of the doctor was far from closed. Now, the wind was at his back as he navigated the narrow, cobbled streets towards Thorne's apartment, a venerable building tucked away in the academic quarter, far from the desolate grandeur of the old lighthouse. Cole's first stop was the university, a labyrinth of gray stone and echoing hallways. A colleague, Finch, a man whose tweed jacket seemed permanently fused to his frame, met him in a dusty office overflowing with ancient texts. Finch's spectacles sat low on his nose, his eyes darting with a nervous energy. Thorne was, but increasingly, isolated. He pursued avenues of research most of us considered, well, esoteric. Cole leaned forward, his gaze steady. Esoteric how, Professor? Finch adjusted his spectacles. He became fixated on myths, legends. The Chronicle of Ethelred one, for instance, a medieval text, supposedly detailing the true history of the early kingdoms. Ancient scholars dismiss it as pure fabrication, a romantic forgery from the Renaissance. Thorne, however, grew convinced of its authenticity. He even believed it held the key to something larger. A grand narrative, he called it. Finch shuddered delicately. We tried to steer him back to more conventional research, of course. But Thorne, once he had a bone, he wouldn't let go. Cole thanked Finch and moved on, the professor's words echoing in his mind. The Chronicle of Ethelred. He'd never heard of it. His next interview was with the doctor, a young, earnest research assistant who had worked closely with Thorne for the past 2 years. Her office, unlike Finch's, was meticulously organized, a stark contrast to the man she described. Professor Thorne was a genius, Lena said, her voice laced with genuine admiration, though her eyes held a hint of sadness. He saw patterns where others saw chaos. But yes, the Chronicle, it consumed him. He rarely spoke of it openly, not to the wider department. They mocked him, you see, agarred it Thorne's folly. Did he ever show you any evidence for its existence? Cole asked. Lena hesitated. He had theories. He believed the official historical records were deliberately incomplete, that the Chronicle was suppressed. He'd pore over obscure maps, ancient land deeds, looking for inconsistencies. He even said he was close to proving it, that he had found a key. A key. Cole felt a prickle of intuition. He left the university with a new direction: Thorne's apartment. The police had already processed the scene, but Cole knew how easily a meticulous mind could hide its secrets. Thorne's study was a testament to a life lived among books. A figure groaned under the weight of leather-bound volumes, stacks of papers threatened to topple from every surface, and a faint, scholarly scent of old paper and dust hung in the air. Cole moved with a quiet purpose, his eyes scanning, assessing. The police would have looked for signs of struggle, forced entry. Cole was looking for Thorne. He started with the desk, a heavy oak monstrosity scarred by decades of use. A person yielded nothing but academic minutiae. He ran his fingers along the underside, checked for false backs. Nothing. He moved to the bookshelves, methodically tapping panels, running his hand along spines. It was painstaking work, the kind of detail most people overlooked. Then, behind a particularly dense collection of obscure medieval histories, his fingers brushed against a faint seam in the wood. A slight pressure, a subtle shift, and a section of the shelf, no larger than a shoebox, swung inward with a soft click. The first was a folded piece of parchment, brittle with age. Cole carefully unfolded it. It wasn't a map, nor a letter, but a jumble of seemingly random letters and numbers. AX7, GH4, P9K, B2R M6L S1Q. A code. The second item was a sheaf of typed pages, bound loosely with a paperclip. It was a research paper, incomplete. Cole scanned the title. Re-evaluating the witness narrative, the officer, and legend. His heart quickened. This was it. He began to read, his eyes devouring the words. Thorne argued with compelling, if unorthodox logic, that the Chronicle of Ethelred was not a myth, but a real document, deliberately suppressed. He cited obscure historical records, discrepancies in royal lineages, and references to a hidden knowledge found in ancient folklore. The consistent omission of specific events and figures across multiple official historical accounts points not to a lack of evidence, but to a deliberate obfuscation, Thorne had written. The myth of Ethelred's chronicle serves as a convenient smokescreen, maintained by those who stand to lose power should its truths be revealed. There exists a lineage, a hidden society, the true guardians of this secret, whose influence extends far beyond mere academic circles. Their network ensures the chronicle remains buried, its power neutralized. I believe I have found the key to unlocking their methods, to exposing their centuries-long deception. The missing link. The paper ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as if Thorne had been interrupted or had simply run out of time. Cole looked at the coded message, then back at the unfinished paper. Thorne hadn't been delusional. He'd been onto something real, something dangerous. The salt-laced wind outside seemed to howl a warning. Cole was no longer just investigating a death. He was uncovering a conspiracy. It had offered little comfort, however, in the days since Thorne's death. He had spent hours sifting through the few personal effects Thorne had left behind, searching for a tremor in the facade. It was a cryptic note, tucked away in the lining of Thorne's worn leather journal, that finally gave him a thread to pull, an address, a date, and the words, "The light will guide." He followed the winding coastal road, the city lights shrinking behind him until only the vast. A skeletal finger against the bruised twilight sky, the abandoned lighthouse stood sentinel on a rocky promontory. A colleague lamp, long extinguished, it was a monument to forgotten warnings, a perfect repository for a dead man's secrets. The key Thorne had left, a heavy, tarnished brass piece, turned with a groan in the rusted lock, protesting the intrusion. The air inside was thick with the scent of salt, damp stone, and disuse. Agent Motes danced in the beam of his flashlight, disturbed by his entrance. This wasn't just an abandoned structure. It was Thorne's clandestine study. A guard of books, maps, and loose papers covered every surface, all meticulously organized despite the general disarray. Cole's gaze settled on a single, heavy, leather-bound volume lying open on a rickety table, its pages brittle with age. The Chronicle of Eldoria. Cole carefully turned a page, the parchment crackling softly. It wasn't just dry historical accounts of a forgotten coastal town. Thorne's marginalia was everywhere, frantic scribbles, arcane symbols, arrows pointing to seemingly innocuous passages. The Serpent's Coil, one note read, underlined 3 times. Thorne hadn't merely been documenting history, he had been deciphering it. The Chronicle wasn't just a record, it was a map, a coded testament to a hidden treasure or a powerful, long-lost secret. Cole realized Thorne hadn't been a simple academic. He had been a seeker, pursuing something monumental, something worth killing for. As Cole delved deeper into the chaotic order of Thorne's research, he found more than just the historian's obsessions. Vivian's scorn, one note read, penned in a furious hand. Blind by ambition, she thinks the Chronicle is hers by right of discovery. A person-woman. She will never understand its true purpose. Dr. Cole recognized the name from Thorne's academic circles. A rival historian, known for her sharp intellect and equally sharp tongue. She had publicly dismissed Thorne's romantic notions about ancient texts, yet Thorne's notes suggested she had an intense, almost proprietary interest in the Chronicle itself. Cole recalled a fleeting mention in the initial police report. The officer had been questioned regarding Thorne's access to certain university archives where the Chronicle had been briefly stored. Her alibi for the night of Thorne's death had been vague. Working late in the archives, a statement difficult to verify independently. Her motive, Cole deduced, was a potent mix of professional jealousy, intellectual ownership of a significant historical find, and now, potentially, the powerful secret the Chronicle hinted at. The other name, Liam Maxwell, appeared with less vitriol but more weariness. Liam's betrayal, one note stated simply. He saw the glint of gold, not the wisdom. Another, he thinks he's owed a share. He doesn't grasp the sacrifice. Liam Maxwell, Thorne's estranged research assistant. The estrangement had happened abruptly 6 months prior, a bitter parting over academic differences, according to Maxwell. But Thorne's notes painted a different picture. A detective had clearly been privy to Thorne's early theories about the Chronicle, perhaps even helped him interpret some of the more obscure passages. His motive, a perceived entitlement to the treasure or secret, revenge for being cut out of what he believed was a lucrative discovery, or perhaps a desperate need for the wealth he believed Thorne had found. The case had just exploded. Thorne wasn't just murdered. He was murdered for something monumental. The Chronicle wasn't merely history, it was a key. And now, Cole had 2 distinct paths, 2 individuals whose motives and questionable alibis entangled them deeply in Thorne's final dangerous quest. Maxwell, fueled by a sense of betrayal and the lure of tangible reward. The salt-laced wind howled outside, a far more menacing sound now, rattling the glass of the unlit lantern room above. Cole looked at the ancient Chronicle, then at the names he'd scribbled on his notepad. He was no longer just investigating a death. He was hunting a killer, and that killer was also hunting a secret. He had to move fast before the killer found what Thorne had died protecting. The abandoned lighthouse, once a beacon, now felt like a trap. Thorne's message, a jumble of seemingly random figures and archaic script, lay splayed across his desk, illuminated by the harsh glow of a single lamp. He'd tried every conventional cipher, every historical code he knew, but Thorne, it seemed, had always preferred the circuitous route. It was only when Cole, in frustration, started cross-referencing the symbols with the marginalia in Thorne's personal copy of a forgotten maritime almanac that a pattern began to emerge. Thorne had used a polyalphabetic substitution, but not with a simple key. Each letter corresponded to a specific, obscure astronomical term, cross-referenced with the page numbers of the almanac itself. It was maddeningly intricate, a testament to Thorne's convoluted brilliance. As the final pieces clicked into place, The jumbled letters resolved into a series of coordinates, followed by a name. The Colleague Library, East Wing. Cole knew it. A section of the sprawling Gothic library that had been closed to the public for decades, deemed structurally unsound. Its contents left to the slow decay of time and dust. It was the perfect place to hide something that needed to be forgotten. A single rusted service door, tucked away behind overgrown rhododendrons, was the most likely entry. Thorn had mentioned a loose hinge in one of his rambling anecdotes about local history. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged paper, dust, and something else. A faint metallic tang. Shelves, heavy with forgotten tomes, leaned precariously. Thorn's cryptic message had also included a reference to a specific constellation, visible only at certain times of the year, projected onto a map of the library's layout. It pointed to a small enclosed room deep within the East Wing, labeled simply as Repository B7. The figure B7 was a journey through a labyrinth of forgotten knowledge. A person draped like funeral shrouds, dust motes danced in the slivers of light, and the occasional creak of settling wood felt like a watchful eye. When he finally located the heavy oak door of B7, it was slightly ajar. A witness had been here. Recently. The dust on the floor was disturbed, a faint, almost imperceptible scuff mark leading from the doorframe. He pushed the door open, his hand instinctively reaching for the heavy brass letter opener he always carried. The room was small, circular, lined with empty shelves. In the center, on a heavy oak table, sat a single leather-bound volume. The Chronicle of the Officer Hand. Cole's breath hitched. He moved towards the table, his eyes scanning the room, every nerve-ending screaming caution. As he reached for the Chronicle, a faint sound, like a shoe scraping on stone, came from behind one of the empty shelves. He froze, his hand hovering over the ancient book. He wasn't alone. "Looking for something, mister." It was impossible to tell where it came from. Cole spun around, trying to pinpoint the source. "Who's there?" The figure detached itself from the deeper gloom, tall and lean, moving with an unnerving grace. They made no aggressive move, but their presence was a palpable threat. "The Chronicle, I presume," the figure said, their voice calm, almost detached. "A rather dangerous pursuit, wouldn't you agree?" Cole's mind raced. How had they known he was coming? How had they known about the Chronicle? "What do you want with it?" "What everyone wants with it, Mr. Cole. The truth." The figure took another step closer, and Cole could make out the glint of something metallic at their hip. Not a gun, but a heavy, ornate dagger. A truth that could unravel centuries of carefully constructed order. A truth that certain institutions would rather remain buried. Cole glanced at the Chronicle, then back at the figure. Thorn's final words echoed in his mind. "The truth will shake their foundations." He understood now. This wasn't just about a lost friend or a forgotten artifact. This was about power, about secrets so profound they threatened the very fabric of the city's elite. The figure wasn't just here to find the Chronicle. They were here to prevent him from finding it, or perhaps to control what happened to it once found. "You won't have it," Cole said, his voice firm, despite the tremor in his hands. "We shall see, mister. We shall see." A detective Cole could react. The figure lunged, not for him, but for the table, sweeping the Chronicle into their arms. Cole instinctively tackled them, a clumsy, desperate move that sent both of them crashing to the dusty floor. The book flew from the figure's grasp, skittering across the stone, coming to rest near an old, forgotten ventilation shaft. The figure recovered quickly, pushing Cole away with surprising strength, then darting towards the fallen book. Cole scrambled up, but the figure was faster. They reached the Chronicle first, snatching it up. A specialist as they did, a section of the floor near the ventilation shaft groaned ominously. The figure hesitated, their eyes darting to Cole, then to the unstable floor. It was a split-second decision. the sound of their retreat quickly fading into the labyrinthine depths of the library. Cole was left alone, gasping for breath, the metallic tang in the air suddenly overwhelming. The chronicle was gone, but the figure's words and thorns reverberated in his mind. The secret within that ancient book wasn't just old history, it was a live wire, capable of sparking an inferno. And now, he wasn't the only one caught in its deadly current. The game had just escalated. 2 days of relentless pursuit, fueled by Thorn's fragmented message, had culminated here, at the crumbling edifice of forgotten knowledge. The main library, a grand if faded testament to the town's past, stood mostly intact. But the west wing was a skeletal ruin, its windows shattered like vacant eyes, its roof partially collapsed, exposing dusty rafters to the elements. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor of unease snaked through Cole as he pushed open a heavy, warped oak door that groaned in protest. Dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of sunlight that pierced the gloom, illuminating towering shelves laden with forgotten tomes, their leather bindings cracked, their pages brittle with age. The air was thick with the scent of decaying paper and damp stone, a mausoleum for stories untold. Cole moved with caution, his footsteps muffled by a thick carpet of dust. Thorn's final cryptic note had spoken of the heart of the forgotten, and Cole's instincts, sharpened by grief and desperation, had led him to believe it referred not to the person, but to a place where knowledge was buried. He navigated through the labyrinthine aisles past shelves that leaned precariously until he reached a section marked Local the Colleague, the Agent Access. The gate, rusted and chained, hung ajar. A guard had been here recently. His heart hammered against his ribs. He knew he was close. A figure the gate, a small enclosed alcove, barely more than a closet, was tucked away. His gaze swept over the few remaining shelves, discerning a subtle displacement, a book that didn't quite fit. He reached for it, his fingers tracing the worn spine. No title, no author. He pulled it free. It was heavier than it looked, its pages thick, almost parchment-like. This had to be it. The Chronicle. He felt a thrill of discovery, quickly overshadowed by a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. You always were tenacious. Cole spun around, the Chronicle clutched tightly in his hand. Liam Maxwell stepped out of the gloom, a silhouette against the slivers of light. There was no weapon visible, but the menace in his posture was palpable. Liam, Cole breathed, the name a bitter taste on his tongue. He had suspected, but to see it confirmed. It was you, a person along. Maxwell offered a faint, humorless smile. Thorn was getting too close. You wanted to make it look like a local, a fisherman, someone driven by petty revenge. A convenient narrative, Maxwell conceded, stepping closer, his eyes fixed on the Chronicle in Cole's grasp. Just as his death was convenient. He was about to expose something far larger than any local feud. The Chronicle, Cole, contains truths that certain parties would prefer remain buried. Permanently. What truths? Cole demanded, his voice tight. What organization are you working for? Maxwell chuckled, a dry, rustling sound like the turning of old pages. A necessary one. A group dedicated to maintaining order, to preventing chaos. A witness believed this book held the key to some grand enlightenment, some lost history that would reshape everything. He saw it as a beacon. We see it as a fuse. And you killed him to stop him from lighting it, Cole finished, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. Thorn's obsession, his secrecy, his fear, it all made sense now. He hadn't just been researching local history. He'd been uncovering a deliberate, generations-long suppression of information. This isn't just about a local legend, is it? It's about a global lie, maintained by your organization for, what? Power? Control? Stability, Maxwell corrected, his voice hardening. Certain truths are too volatile for the common man. They lead to unrest, to questioning, to the dismantling of carefully constructed foundations. A officer was a fool, a romantic. He thought the world deserved to know. We know better. Maxwell took another step, his hand subtly reaching into his coat. Now, give me the Chronicle, Cole. There's no need for anyone else to get hurt. Cole gripped the heavy book tighter. You killed Thorne. You tried to frame an innocent man. You're a murderer, Liam, not a guardian of stability. A necessary evil, Maxwell said, his eyes narrowing. And you, Cole, are becoming a nuisance. He lunged, not for Cole, but for the book. Cole was ready. He ducked, using the bulk of the Chronicle as a shield, and slammed it against a nearby precariously stacked column of books. The old wood groaned, and the entire stack swayed violently. Maxwell, caught off guard by the sudden movement and the shifting debris, stumbled back, his eyes widening as the first few heavy volumes tumbled. He knew he couldn't fight Maxwell physically, but he could use the environment, the very decay of the library, against him. Maxwell roared, lunging again, but Cole had already moved. He kicked out at the base of another, even larger shelf, sending a cascade of ancient texts raining down. Dust exploded into the air, blinding and choking. Maxwell coughed, momentarily disoriented, as a heavy dictionary thudded near his head. Cole scrambled backwards, using the cover of the falling books and the swirling dust. He didn't have time to read the Chronicle, but he had to secure it, to keep it out of Maxwell's hands. He saw a gap in the collapsing shelves, a narrow passage leading deeper into the ruins. He bolted, not looking back, the sound of Maxwell's frustrated shouts and the continued crash of falling books echoing behind him. He burst out of the library wing's rear exit into the cool, salty night air. His lungs burned, his heart pounded. But in his mind, one thought resonated. The Chronicle was safe, for now. He hadn't outsmarted Maxwell with brute force, but with the very weight of forgotten knowledge. He held no physical weapon, but he carried something far more dangerous. The truth. The full extent of the conspiracy, the true motive behind Thorne's murder, it was all contained within the heavy, silent pages of the Chronicle now clutched against Cole's chest. The fight was far from over, but the first decisive blow had been struck. The raw, primal urgency of the lighthouse had given way to the methodical grind of justice. He'd entrusted the Chronicle, that ancient, fragile vessel of truth, into the hands of a special task force moments after Maxwell's capture. The subsequent days had been a blur of debriefings, statements, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing the machinery of the law engage. The Chronicle's existence, and more importantly, its explosive contents, had indeed sent tremors through the academic and political worlds. The meticulously documented truths within its pages, detailing a long-suppressed lineage of power, corruption, and an almost mythical struggle for control over historical narratives, had ignited a firestorm. A colleague historian scrambled to reevaluate established timelines, while politicians, some with surprisingly pale faces, issued carefully worded denials or vague promises of transparency. Maxwell, stripped of his carefully constructed facade of scholarly authority, had been apprehended on the lighthouse's rugged base. His desperate final attempt to destroy the Chronicle had failed, leaving him with nothing but a ruined reputation and a litany of charges. They were not a single entity with a simple name, but a web of interconnected interests, united by a shared desire to manipulate the past for present gain. The arrests were ongoing, the investigations widening, but the core of their operations had been irrevocably compromised. The truth, once buried, was now a wrecking ball. An agent later, Cole sat opposite Clara in a quiet corner of a small, sunlit cafe. He had wanted to meet her away from the sterile formality of official channels, to offer her something more personal. Your ancestor, Elias Thorne, he was the true chronicler. The official records, the ones that painted him as a madman, a traitor. They were all fabrications. He was trying to expose the network, the same one the guard served. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, but it wasn't one of sorrow. It was a tear of release, of understanding. My family, We always felt it, you know? This ache, this sense of a missing piece. My grandmother, she used to say history was a living thing, always trying to break free. She offered a watery smile. She was right. Cole nodded, the weight of the revelation settling heavily in the air. The Chronicle proves it. It details their methods, their members, their entire agenda to control the narrative of the age. Elias was brave. He paid the ultimate price to preserve the truth. He paused, reflecting on the lengths people went to control history, to shape reality to their will. It was a terrifying power, one that had nearly consumed him. The truth is a dangerous thing, Clara. A figure enough to ruin lives or to redeem them. Clara reached across the table, briefly touching his hand. Thank you, Cole, for finding it, for bringing it to light. He could only offer a humble nod. The case had changed him, irrevocably. He was no longer just an archivist, a scholar of forgotten texts. He had become an accidental guardian, a reluctant participant in history's fierce struggle for liberation. The academic world, once a safe haven of dusty tomes and quiet contemplation, now seemed fraught with peril, a battleground where narratives were forged and shattered. As he walked away from the cafe, leaving Clara with a sense of peace he hoped would endure, Cole considered the future of his own work. The meticulous cataloging, the quiet research, the pursuit of fragmented knowledge, it all felt different now. He had seen the raw power of truth and the ruthless determination of those who sought to suppress it. His path, once clear and predictable, now seemed to stretch into an uncertain horizon, filled with both danger and profound purpose. He would continue to seek out the hidden histories, to piece together the fragments of forgotten lives, but with a new vigilance, a deeper understanding of the stakes. The salt-laced wind might have faded, but the echoes of its warnings would forever guide his way.